Here's the thing. Birds are real, and it's mean to say that they're not. My name's Keish.
I'm Sam.
Welcome to episode 8 of the Birds Are Real podcast.
I can't believe it's gone this long, honestly.
I know. I don't necessarily know what would stop us, but yeah, no, it's really cool that we're 8 episodes into this. I don't know if we ever mentioned this on the pod, but I think we kind of jokingly mentioned starting a podcast, and then you were just like, yo, I bought a mic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's cool that we're here. It's kind of awesome.
I won $200 betting on baseball games, and then I stopped betting on baseball games, and I bought a microphone, and we started this podcast.
Yeah, good thing you stopped betting. You probably would have bet a lot of money on the Yankees winning this World Series.
Oh, they're too soon. By the time
it's happening right now.
By the time this episode comes out, the Yankees will be World Series champions. Mark my words.
Hot take.
Very hot take. Hey everyone. This is Sam from the future. The Yankees lost. I'm sad. Back to the podcast. Speaking of hot takes, not actually. That's a later section.
Good segue though.
Yes, thank you. You know, we kind of start our episodes these days with sort of a weekly update, what we were doing over the last week, birds we saw, places we went, and stuff like that. Well, longtime listener, people may remember from an earlier episode, he asked one of our questions for our Hoot topic, Randy Spaghetti. He's back with a great suggestion. He suggested that we call this first section the field notes.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it makes me feel like way more legitimate than I actually am.
Yeah, it makes me think that I should probably actually write field notes down when I'm out birding, because I notice some cool things and I think I remember them, and then I go home and I just forget it all.
Yeah, I completely forget everything.
So yeah, we're going to call this the field notes section, and maybe I'll get a little notebook to keep in my pocket while I bird.
Yeah, very cool. Like Steve from Blue's Clues.
Yeah, exactly.
Writing it with a crayon.
Just like that.
Yeah.
On that note, let's get into the field notes.
On that field note?
I think on that note is fine. We went on a bird walk this past weekend.
Yeah.
It was a joint effort by Bird Philly and Philly Queer Birders. They joined forces, I guess.
Yeah, they put on this event
together. And they set up this bird walk at Pennypack on the Delaware.
Yeah, a place I had heard about a lot, never been.
Yeah, it's a hot place on eBird. A lot of bird sightings there, but I hadn't been. It's kind of way across the city for me.
Right.
A little farther than John Hines, so I typically just go to John Hines. But I'm glad I went at least once. Yeah,
really cool event. So many people were there.
Yeah, there's a lot of people.
Huge. I've never been birding with that many people at once.
Mm-mm. I didn't notice it until I was there, but I think that was the first bird walk for me.
Yeah. Because
usually I just either go with you or go alone or with a couple of our friends, but yeah, never as with a large group or with a leader or two calling out birds, stuff like that.
Yeah, I've only really been on 2, I think, and that was when I did the bird club in college, and there were 6 of us. The very first one I went on, I fell over all the way to the ground 3 times.
3 times.
And so I was kind of embarrassed. It was my first time seeing all these people, so I turned to the leader and I was like, oh, haha, is that the record for the most number of times someone's fallen over during one of these? And he looked back at me completely dead-eyed and just said, no one's ever fallen down before.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, we saw some cool birds. Nothing super out of the ordinary there, but it was a good way to get acquainted with the area. Might go back closer to the winter time, probably not anytime soon.
Yeah. Maybe to see some. It's on the Delaware River, so in theory there's lots of good ducks and stuff once it gets maybe a little colder. And I think it was really popping off during spring migration.
That makes sense. Yeah, it was really cool. I think he was the leader of Bird Philly, but I'm not sure. I don't remember his name. But he was really good at identifying a lot of calls just by sound. He's like, oh, red-bellied woodpecker over there, song sparrow over here. And yeah, that was just really cool to see live. Both of us did kind of contribute to a bird sighting that no one else really saw or heard. I saw the black-capped chickadee, and then Sam confirmed it by hearing it.
Yeah, that's a classic sound.
And then I pulled out Merlin and also confirmed it that way. So that was really cool.
I got a picture of it. It's very in the shadows, but yeah, I was able to confirm it. And then I felt so bad. This guy came up to me and was like, oh my God, what's your identification process? How did you do that? And I was like, I took a picture of it. And I had nothing for him.
You should have talked to him about the chickadee call, though.
I should have.
Yeah, apparently black-capped chickadees, there's a phenomenon called eruption, IRRUPTION. Basically, I think it just means like a sudden population boom in the area for a certain species of birds. I'm sure there's not one reason why eruptions occur. There's plenty of reasons, but there's a eruption of black-capped chickadees in the area, and a lot of people on the Discord have been pointing it out. So it was cool to see that.
Yeah, and like growing up, in New England, especially where I grew up, there were so many black-capped chickadees in my backyard basically year-round. They were such a common occurrence. So I was kind of surprised that everyone was so excited to see one. And I mean, I like them. I'm always like excited, but it's not something that's out of the ordinary for me. So that was that was the first time I think I got to have the feeling of like, oh, I've seen this bird that everyone's so excited to see,
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, and the day before, so that was on a Sunday that we all went to the joint bird walk. On the Saturday, you and Richelle went to Hawk Mountain, and
Yes,
I
we
went
did.
to John Hines by myself. Do you want to talk about Hawk Mountain real quick?
Hawk Mountain, pretty well known around here, Pennsylvania, for being one of the places to go for raptor migration, just for seeing raptors in general. Raptors being birds of prey. I don't know if we've ever said that. We just say raptors a lot, but raptors are birds of prey.
To be clear.
Unless this is another peep situation and I'm wrong. But
Are owls considered raptors, though? Because I know they're birds of prey.
in my mind they are, but that might not be true.
Maybe a little peep caliger situation.
Maybe, yeah. I'll have to look into the genus.
Yeah.
But, so we went, it's a little further away than I thought it was, so we kind of got a late start. Got there like an hour before sunset, and we saw one blue jay.
Nice.
And a red-tailed hawk, maybe. So
Some days are just tough,
Yep.
Some days you don't. Some days, the birds just don't want to show out for you, and that's okay. It happens.
Yeah.
But on that same day, I was at John Hines. Honestly, didn't get too much like actual birding in, but because I was just talking to so many people, and like people were recommending, places to go because Cape May's fresh in my mind, and was a great trip. So now I'm thinking, oh, what are some other places around us that I maybe don't know about? So I was asking around. People gave some really good suggestions, including Conowingo Dam. I think that's technically in Maryland, but there's a lot of bald eagles that nest there. So, I mean, bald eagles, not super rare for us. We see them all the time, but I think there's a large concentration there, and you can get pretty close.
yeah, Keith showed me the Google Maps image for that place, and there's a bald eagle in that image.
Yeah,
so,
it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
They also mentioned Ocean City, which is like I guess relatively close to Cape May.
Yeah.
A lot of herons there in the spring summertime, and you can get really really close to them. You've been to Forsyth
I have.
National Wildlife Refuge. I haven't. I hear Bombay Hook is similar in Delaware. Someone gave me a recommendation for McGee Marsh in Ohio. I was like, all right, if I'm ever in Ohio,
We'll think about
I'll
it.
think
yeah.
about it to see some prothonotary warblers.
Ooh, worth 8 points in wingspan, I think.
Good large bird in wingspan. They also mentioned snow geese migration in Middle Creek. Unplanned reference to a hoot topic. Iris sent this in as a hoot topic in the past, and we just messaged her back because we didn't necessarily incorporate it into an episode. But I think it's cool that, another birder that we talked to mentioned it, and definitely really recommended it.
Yeah, very cool. It is something that now I would very much like to see. To be honest with you, maybe because I wasn't really thinking about it, or just because I didn't know, I wasn't really aware that there were many more geese besides Canada geese in our area. But
Yeah.
I guess there's snow geese. And also, Keish introduced this to me last week. We were just talking. There's a goose called a cackling goose, which is just like a mini Canada goose.
Yeah, it literally looks like the exact same thing. It's just like 33% smaller.
So, very difficult to tell because who knows, like, is this a juvenile Canada goose? Is this a cackling goose? It's probably not a cackling goose. I think they're pretty rare, but kind of a fun little fact for y'all.
Yeah, probably should look into a little more on how to differentiate them because we see Canada geese all the time, and maybe there's a cackling goose hidden in there somewhere.
Now's probably the time we'd see it.
And then for the actual hoot topic today, sent to us by Eveline, what is your best birding memory and why?
So I think we both have the exact same answer to this. So if you listened to the last episode, you may know what it is. We are not counting when we went to Cape May and saw the barred owl.
Yeah, because that would definitely be the top for sure. So we're just going to omit that.
Yep.
Do you have one?
I do. So this was either before or right at the beginning of when I really got into birds, really got into birding. And I was just hiking up this little trail in Connecticut that I like to go to. It's called Lantern Hill. If anyone has been to Lantern Hill, shout out you. It's kind of this fun hill, sort of mountainy type hike. So it's pretty cool. You get up to the top of this hike. If you've ever gone hiking in New England, you know, even if it's like a mountain hike where you're supposed to have great views, pretty much the whole time you're just in trees and you can't really see anything.
Yeah.
But you get to the top and there's a couple of clearings where you can see really well and it's beautiful. So I went on a pretty quiet day. No one else was really there. And I got to the top and there were like 10 vultures, turkey vultures, black vultures, just kind of sitting up at the top so close to me. And they were pretty tolerant. I had my camera. This was maybe the first outing I went on with my camera. I didn't have a long lens yet. I just had the kit lens. And I was able to get some really cool pictures of these vultures. Birds, you know, I think you don't really think about because they're always just kind of circling way up in the sky.
Very
you don't
far
see
away
them
from you.
really far away.
Yeah.
They sort of have this reputation for being sort of sinister, you know, scavengers. But I don't know. I really kind of fell in love with them. They're really interesting looking. Nothing quite like it.
Yeah.
That's probably it for me.
No, yeah, that's really cool. You said they were turkey vultures or like black vultures?
Both.
Both. Yep. Nice. Awesome. My best birding memory, I think, would be when we were in the Poconos. We were up super early in the morning, and we got to this relatively secluded dam. I forget what it's called.
I do too.
It's like Brady's Lake or something.
Brady's Lake, I think that's it. Yep.
Yeah, Brady's Lake. And yeah, it was like super foggy, very like, I don't know, the ambiance of the day was just really nice. And we were up super early, and we get to this, like, I guess you call it a gorge.
Yeah.
It was, or like, you know, there's this clearing where there's two elevated sides and one like valley kind of thing. And this belted kingfisher was just like zipping and zooming, putting on a show for us. Yeah, that was just really cool. And that was like the first thing we saw as soon as we got there.
Yep.
And at the time, I was like, I mean, I still am, like, really wanting to see belted kingfishers just because, I don't know, I hadn't seen them at the time and I thought they looked really cool. And yeah, no, that was just a moment of wonder for me for sure.
Yeah, I remember that. It was really cool. It would like zip in and out of the fog, so like it would disappear and then reappear, and it was a real special morning.
Yeah, super
really glad
special
we
morning.
went.
I remember like trying to get a photo of it, and then just being like, you know what, I'm just gonna watch this thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, first of all, it's not gonna come out good.
No.
It's like super foggy and it's super fast. I'm just gonna take it in. Thanks for the hoot topics. Please send us some in. We're running rather thin.
We are running
on our hoot topic bank here, so please send some in.
Yep, you can email us birdsarereal.pod@gmail.com, or you can message us on Instagram.
Yeah. Also at Birds Are Real Pod.
So we're into our main topic now, and Keisha's leading this one.
Yeah. Also, if you now we have names for every single section. We didn't even name the field note section before, and we have a name for it. But we still don't have a name for the main topic. So if you have a good idea for that, let us know. So as I was thinking about what to talk about in today's episode, I wanted to talk about something unique to birds, something that birds can call their own, right? So I got to thinking, what do birds have claim to that no other species or classification of animal does? And I think when we think of birds, we immediately go to flight. So wings. Birds are the only things with wings, so we're going to talk about wings today. How do you feel about that?
What about bats?
What about bats?
Don't they have wings?
You're very smart. I'm glad you said that, because bats and insects also have wings. So I also arrived at that same conclusion. So I was like, if not wings, then what else is unique to birds? And then I landed on beaks or bills.
Ooh, okay.
So that's what we're talking about today, beaks and or bills.
Ooh. What about turtles or fish? I feel like sometimes you call a fish mouth a beak.
Yeah, another good point. Turtles do have beaks. Parrotfish kind of have beaks. But so, I mean, I thought I was right. You know, beaks are only associated with birds. So I was almost done researching this episode, talking about beaks. And I remembered that I went to a holiday party this last weekend, and a guy was dressed up as Perry the Platypus. which is a mammal. And that spoiled that plan because they clearly have bills, right?
Right.
And then I was like, okay, birds are the only animals to lay eggs.
What about the platypus?
And then I felt like Dr. Doofenshmirtz over here because platypuses also lay eggs and literally every other reptile. But don't worry about that. Okay, so I was like, this has to be it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that is unique to birds is that they are bipedal and that all other animals are primarily on 4 or more legs, so they're quadrupeds.
Oh. Now, I hate to poke another hole, but...
No, please.
What about humans?
Oh, my God. All right, dude, I give up. This episode's a bust. I feel like we need to regroup here. Can you think of anything that, is unique to birds that only birds have?
Oh, boy. I mean, what have we've talked about the wings, we've talked about the beaks, we've talked about...
Yeah, let's try to salvage this episode because I got nothing.
I don't know, feathers?
Yes, feathers. Let's talk about some feathers today. Thanks for bearing with me through that one. By the way, I got most of the information about feathers for this episode from allaboutbirds.com. It's a great website.
Yeah,
I think
I've
it's
used that one.
associated with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And also this YouTuber, BioBush.
Ooh, I've never heard of that.
And some other references that they both mention. Do you know what feathers are made out of?
The basic unit of a feather?
Yeah.
Is it like hair?
Okay, yes, hair. It's the same protein that makes up your hair and nails, which is...
keratin.
Nice.
Is that right?
I knew you had it in your noggin
right.
somewhere. So, we're going to get into a little bit of feather anatomy here, okay?
Very cool.
Most feathers follow the same basic structure. So, everything I'm going to say here is true for 99% of feathers. There's always some niche exceptions. Mm-hmm. So, first you have the calamus, which is the thickest part of the shaft, which doesn't have any barbs or protrusions coming out of it, right?
Okay. Kind of like the stem of a leaf, right?
Yeah, pretty much, except the calamus is hollow, and that's where the bird's muscles attach to move the feathers and everything.
Oh.
Yeah, so as the shaft thins out, the thinner part of the shaft is called the rachis, and off the rachis you get the barbs, which is what you think of the feathery part of the feather, right?
Okay.
And off those you even get super tiny barbules, which are sometimes harder to see with the naked eye, but even off the main stem of the rachis you get these barbs, and even off of those you get some little barbs as well. And obviously each feather comes in different shapes and sizes, so the exact structure of each feather of course depends on the species and also the intended use of the feather, because I don't know if you've noticed, when you see a bird, it doesn't have one of the same feather all over its body, right? It has a bunch of different types of feathers.
Yeah, that's actually something that I feel like I've always wondered, but I've never been able to kind of put it into words. Because when you see a feather on the ground, right? You pick up a feather, it looks like a blue jay feather maybe. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty long feather. But the stuff around a blue jay's face and stuff, that's also feather, right?
Exactly, yeah. Okay. And those are obviously, you probably pick up a wing feather off the ground. Mm-hmm. It's pretty long, but it doesn't have those all over its face, right? So a lot of different feathers, and their size, shape, structure kind of depends on what they're used for. So this is a tough question. There are 7 different types of bird feathers. Can you name some of them?
Ooh. Scientific names, or are we talking wing feather? Is it
wing feather counts? Okay. And it may be helpful to think of the function of each different feather to help you think of the type of feather.
So here's my 7. I'm gonna say wing feather. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna say face feather.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with belly feather. Maybe there's an underwing feather too. Maybe the underside of a wing has a different feather.
Okay, interesting.
I need 3 more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How about back feather?
Okay.
And right leg feather and left leg feather.
Okay, I think you got one right, which was the wing feather.
Nice. That's the one you gave me before we started.
Right.
Yeah.
But I like where you were going. You were thinking about different body parts, and I think the one body part you missed was the tail feather, which is another one.
Oh yeah, birds have tails.
Yeah, exactly, tail feather. And then the other feathers are more named after the way they look or their function, right? So let me just go over all 7. So you have the wing feather, you have the tail feather, you have contour feathers, you have semi-plume, you have down feathers, you have bristle feathers, and you have phyloplume feathers.
I can't believe I forgot phyloplume.
Yeah, I mean, that's common knowledge, so that's just poor on your part. all of these feathers, or these structures of feathers, are important for different reasons. So let's go through all of them.
Great.
Wing feathers. What do you think they're used for?
Flying.
Yeah, good. Of course, they're built for flight. They have this interlocking structure between the barbs that provides a smooth, wind-proof surface, which also facilitates lift.
Ooh.
Think Bernoulli's principle. The region where this interlocking happens is called the pennaceous region. So you know when we get like super close, sharp photos of warblers?
Mm-hmm. All the time.
All the time. But no, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And like you get to see like that fine lattice feather detail.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I'm talking about in terms of the pennaceous region.
Cool. Okay.
And we'll talk about how this pennaceous region is also apparent in some of these other types of feathers, right? But for the wing feathers specifically, that interlocking region, it helps with windproofing and creating lift.
Okay.
Other than that, wing feathers are long and stiff, and usually asymmetrical for aerodynamic reasons. So when you pick up a feather, it's not perfectly symmetrical, right? There's a longer edge and a shorter edge. And that just helps them cut through the wind a little better.
I never thought about that, but you're 100% right.
I also didn't think about it until I read this. I was like, now that you mention it, they are never like perfectly uniform. Wing feathers are also called remiges.
Remiges?
Remiges.
Huh?
Just keep that in your head for the
Yeah.
rest of your life.
Sick remiges, bro.
Yeah, and these are the typical quill type of feathers that you'll see like people dipping ink into and writing, or that you like find on the ground.
Oh, and I guess since they're hollow, it actually holds some ink inside.
Because that's the calamus is holding the ink, right?
Okay.
So moving on to tail feathers, these are called rectrices. They also have pennaceous regions, so like that tight interlocking for aerodynamics, but the main purpose of these tail feathers is to steer the bird.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, sort of like a rudder.
Yeah, exactly, like a rudder, like the rudder of a ship or something. Can you think of another reason from what we've seen in the wild that tail feathers could be used for, other than aerodynamics?
Well, I know some birds, specifically perhaps the peacock comes to mind, but I think a lot of them use them in mating displays.
Yep, 100% right. We'll get to mating displays in a second, but yes, you're right. Another big use of the tail feathers and many species. The contour feathers, which is where I think you were getting with when you said body feathers a little bit.
Back and belly.
Yeah, the contour feathers are the feathers that cover most of the bird's body. They have the pennaceous regions, so the tight interlocking, but they also have plumulaceous regions. The pennaceous regions on the contour wings are more used for like waterproofing.
Okay.
You can think of like a duck.
Right.
And the tight lattice, the tight interlocking of the structure there helps with, waterproofing, keeping water off the body of the bird. The plumulaceous regions are a little looser. They don't have as tight of an interlocking structure. So this allows air to get trapped in between these empty spaces between the structures of the feathers. And air, if you know, is a really good insulator. So it helps keep the birds warm.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. Moving on to semi-plume. Any idea what semi-plume feathers could do?
Ooh, okay. No.
Great. Way to be honest. So the semi-plume feathers are the feathers that you can't really see. They're the feathers that are under all the other larger feathers or other structures of the bird. And they have a lot of plumulaceous regions, which helps with insulation, which kind of makes sense. They're under the rest of the feathers. And they also somewhat contribute to body shape. So I don't know if you've seen like molted birds versus like when birds are under like full plumage.
Right.
They're a lot skinnier than you may think.
Yeah.
But when they have all their feathers, they look kind of chunky.
Right.
So
Well, it's like if you shave a cat, they're way smaller than you think they are.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the semi-plume feathers. They also kind of contribute to the body shape.
Okay.
Down feathers, I'm sure you've heard of.
Mm-hmm.
They're meant for warmth. They're primarily plumulaceous, and they trap air, which is a good insulator, like I mentioned before. Phyloplume feathers. Do you know what phyloplume feathers are?
Of course I know what phyloplume
I mean, you
feathers-
should. You mentioned them last episode.
Phylum. That's like a
Kingdom,
bigger than a
genus,
genus,
class.
right?
Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species.
Are those the ones that go on the face?
Yeah, good.
Ooh.
So they're like the whisker-like ones, which is...
Like the whippoorwill's rictal bristles.
Exactly, like the whippoorwill from the Halloween episode, which you should listen to if you haven't listened to it yet. You kind of mentioned that it kind of helps them catch food, right? From what I read, it also helps them sense the position of their other feathers, primarily their contour feathers, so they can like readjust if they need to.
Oh, very cool.
And lastly, we have the bristle feather. Simplest structure. It's usually just the rachis, which is like the thinner part of the shaft, but it has no barbs coming off of it.
Oh, okay.
These are usually found on like the heads of birds, and they provide eye and face protection.
Oh, I see. So when you look at like a starling and it looks like it has kind of like gelled spiky hair, that's the bristle feathers.
I think so. I don't know exactly for that example,
Sure.
but yeah, I think if you think of like crests on certain birds, I think those are primarily bristle feathers.
Okay.
So now we've talked about the structure of some feathers, and we talked about what some of the feathers do, right? So let's name off what we talked about, like in terms of function.
Flight, steering, showing off, warmth, body shape.
And like waterproofing.
And waterproofing.
Right? Great. So we talked about the structure, which definitely comes into play in most of these, but we didn't necessarily talk about an important part of the feather that comes into play when we're talking about display, like mating displays or camouflage. What is that part of the feather?
Well, I guess it would be the color, the pigment.
Exactly, the color of the feather. So let me back up a bit before we talk about how pigment is involved in the feather. So similar to hair, as we talked about before, keratin is the same protein that builds our hair. That's also present in feathers. So the feather initially grows from a follicle.
Right.
Kind of like your hair.
Okay.
Cells are dividing at the base of that follicle. So if you kind of think of like your hair growing out of your head, as more cells divide at the base, your hair becomes longer and it pokes out of your head, right? Same thing with feathers. And then the older cells that are furthest away from the base end up differentiating into the particular structure of, whichever type of feather it is, one of the 7 that we talked about. And of course, it's based on species as well, right? And it's within the genetic code of these birds, within the cells, that determines what kind of feather they differentiate into and whether or not to deposit any pigment. Sometimes there's an even deposition of melanin, which is, of course, a pigment, and you get the plumage of like a blackbird, a grackle, or a crow, right? Sometimes specific feathers are coated to produce pigment, while others are not. Can you think of an example of a bird where that's the case?
Maybe like a red-winged blackbird.
Good. Yeah, a red-winged blackbird works. We'll talk about non-dark pigments, right?
Oh, okay.
Because like the color pigments are a little different. I was thinking something like a penguin, where its back is black and its belly is white. So the feathers on its back and on its head are genetically coded to deposit black pigment or deposit melanin, which makes them darker, and the feathers on its belly are not coded to deposit any melanin, which is why they're not pigmented at all, which is why they're clear white.
Got it.
Which is why they're white. I don't know if clear is technically right. And of course, they can get more complicated. Many plumages are not just like, is it dark or not? Or is, it's not like necessarily like a uniform pattern necessarily. Think of like the wing feather of a Cooper's hawk, right? It has like these bands.
Yeah. Another bird we helped identify over the weekend, by the way.
Yeah, Sam got a great pick. He almost didn't want to help the people out, though.
I was a little nervous.
He was a little nervous.
There's a big group.
We heard them being like, "Oh my God, what was that? Was it a sharp-shinned? Was it a Cooper's hawk?" And here's this guy, super crisp photo, just trying to stay in the dark.
We didn't actually really figure out what it was after I
we
showed
didn't.
the photo, though.
Yeah, I kind of threw him to the fire there. I was like, "Hey, this guy's got a nice pick." So earlier, you talked about a red-winged blackbird. So a red-winged blackbird has orangey red feathers in like the middle of its wing. So those are, of course, not produced by melanin, right? Because melanin only produces like black or like shades of darkness in that sense. Sam, name some colors for me.
Green.
Got any more?
Yes. Yellow. Purple. Orange.
One more.
Blue.
Yeah, nice. Good job naming some colors. Did you know blue pigment doesn't exist at all?
I've heard rumors of this, but I'm not really clear on why.
Yeah, so when you see a blue jay, or like when you see a crow, you're seeing that a crow is black because it has melanin, it has pigment. You're looking at the pigment.
Right.
When you see a blue jay, you're actually looking at reflected light. There's actually no blue pigment there's no physical blue pigment in the feather. So the way that works is, in birds that have blue feathers, they have these little air bubbles within the feathers. So as the feather is forming, it starts off as little water bubbles. But as those water bubbles evaporate, they leave just pockets of air, right? And these pockets of air, they're a specific distance apart. I think for blue light, it's probably around like 500 nanometers or something. Don't quote me on that. But because they're that specific distance apart and the pigment that is there is gray, that gray pigment is absorbing every other color of light. And because of the air bubbles, it reflects the blue light, right?
Ooh.
So the only reason we see it, so the feathers, the pigment is actually gray. But it's just absorbing all the other light, and the only light that bounces off is blue. So that's what we see.
That's really cool. I don't want to make all the physics people who listen to this thing mad, but I'm going to talk about some physics, and I'm probably going to be wrong.
Nice.
I think that's also why the sky is blue.
I think you're right. You want to elaborate? Is it like water?
Well, I think I'm pretty sure it's the nitrogen in the air.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
So nitrogen is small enough that it traps blue wavelengths.
Mm-hmm. And nitrogen makes up most of our atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's like 70% or something.
I think so, right? So it's bouncing all around. And that's why at sunset, you don't see the blue sky. You see kind of the red sky because those wavelengths pass through the nitrogen. So while all the sun's rays get, the blue light kind of gets caught where it's pointed right at the earth. Mm-hmm. When you're sort of not directly beneath the sun, so like at sunset or sunrise, only the red and like the orange and that kind of light can come through.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. If you're a physics snob and you have a better answer, do let us know.
Yeah. So that's interesting because recently I've been having this issue where I'll catch out of the corner of my eye a bird flying and I'm like, whoa, that was a blue jay with no crest. But then I look closer and it's a mockingbird, which is gray. So I wonder if I'm getting some trick of the light where
Like an angle.
for like an instant the mockingbird looks blue to me.
Yeah. This is primarily how quote unquote blue feathers are shown in nature. There is another way where it has something to do with like a film like quality to the feathers. I don't know if that's coming into play maybe with that. But primarily it's this like the feathers are reflecting the blue light. So we talked about quote unquote blue feathers. Do you know how green feathers are made?
Well, my world's just been turned upside down because there's no blue pigment in feathers. So I'm afraid to say that there's green pigment in feathers. Do birds just like roll around in the grass or something?
So, good guess, but it's the same concept as the blue feathers, like literally the same exact concept, except if they want to show green feathers, they have this yellow film on the feather. So
it's like a filter.
It's like a filter. So blue plus yellow makes
green.
Exactly. So that's how they make green feathers. In I think every bird except one, I forgot to write down the name of the bird, but they have some like reaction with copper within their feathers. And if you ever talked about energy levels or
where like the
electrons bounce up. Yeah, do you know what that's called?
Is that like it's not like escape velocity, is it? It's like
it has to do something with
something
escape
like
velocity.
that, isn't it?
Yeah. So I should probably know this, but it has something to do with like escape velocity. When you like excite an electron, it like moves up a valence shell or something. But if you do that with copper, you'll get like a green color. So this specific bird makes use of copper to have actual green in its feathers. So one cool thing that most birds can't do, but the clubbed wing manakin can do, is make a call or a sound from its wings.
Nice.
Can you name another bird that may be able to make a call or a sound from its wings?
Can I name another bird?
I think you
Even
can.
did I listen to episode 3 of this podcast, The Mystery of the Timberdoodle Tango? The American woodcock can do that.
Yes, very cool. So the club-winged manakin is a bird native to Central South America, and the way researcher Kimberly Botswick describes how it is able to make sounds with just its feathers/wings is similar to how many insects, take for example a cricket, can make a sound by rubbing two parts of its body together.
That makes sense.
To create like a vibration sort of sound.
Yeah, like a violin.
Kind of like a violin, yeah. So the clubbed-winged manakin specifically has an enlarged rachis, going back to the feather anatomy here.
Right.
So the rachis on very specific feathers on the clubbed-winged manakin are pretty large, and they have these ridges in them, 7 ridges specifically. And when the clubbed-winged manakin brings its wings together, it rubs what we call a pick feather along the larger rachis of these specific feathers. So it goes up and down the 7 ridges. So
so it's like strumming.
Yeah, it makes a call that way. Should we listen to it?
Yeah, please.
Doesn't that sound very electronic.
Yeah, I can't believe a bird's feathers just making that sound.
Yeah, and it just rubbing its like feathers together. It kind of sounds like a when your smoke detector runs out of battery and it's just like beeping. Yeah, I think it's crazy that a bird can make a sound like that. Like, I mean, I think I could believe it if it made it sound from like with its voice. Yeah, but with its wings, it's kind of wild.
That's nuts.
Yeah, so I think this is just super cool because, you know, we talked about a lot of information about why we think birds use their feathers, why their structure is the way it is to help with its function. But people are still learning stuff like this with the club-winged manakin, different uses for the feathers, like making sound.
Yeah, that's super cool. I wish I could do that with my hair, you know?
I mean, they're both made out of keratin, so I don't see why not.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, has anyone tried? Let me try right now. Nope, doesn't work.
You use like horse hair at least when you do a
That's true.
when you make a violin bow.
Yeah, but you're like making it taut and everything. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't think it counts.
Yeah, that's all I got for feathers for now.
Feathers, super cool.
Yeah.
When we were going through all the things that made birds unique, I was like, oh, it would be cool to talk about wings. Oh, it would be cool to talk about beaks. I'm so glad we talked about feathers.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that no other animal has feathers. I guess if you want to think reptiles in the past did have feathers, if you think about the dinosaurs.
Right. I saw recently that scientists found a dinosaur tail feather encased in amber.
Whoa. So super highly preserved.
I think so.
Yeah. So
it was on like a Instagram post that I scrolled past, so I don't know how true it is, but
gotcha. Well, I mean, from what I read, people are definitely in general agreement that bird feathers, or like birds in general, did evolve from dinosaurs, and that dinosaurs did have feathers, mainly for like ornamentation or like display and stuff like that. They didn't necessarily have feathers for the purpose of flight, right? Because I don't think there are any flighted there are no dinosaurs. But those are not dinosaurs, though.
They're not dinosaurs?
I don't think so. I don't think they're technically dinosaurs.
Whoa. My mind has been blown.
Cut that out if I'm wrong. And I think over time, the complexity of the feathers, along with many other factors such as like body size, bones, stuff like that, culminated in birds being able to fly.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we know from the Flightless Bird episode, you need those hollow bones. You need those hollow feathers in order to fly, unless you're a bat.
All right, so I guess it's now time for the closing caw.
The closing caw. If you didn't hear our last episode, that's what we're calling the bird call quiz now. The closing caw.
Yeah, I think we forgot to mention the score last time. We did some math. We think it's 5-4.
Pretty sure it's 5-4.
We also mentioned that we're not gonna baby each other anymore. Maybe give each other some slightly more difficult ones. Hopefully not too much more difficult.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it goes.
Sam from the future, back again. Yeah, the audio cut out here. We had some very witty banter. Just pretend you heard the funniest thing you've ever heard. And I am now playing a bird call for Quiche.
It does sound familiar. Kinda lost on this one, I'll be honest with you. I'm thinking a songbird. It sounds small, high-pitched. Doesn't jump out to me super obviously, so I feel like it's something that I haven't heard too many times. I think we may have heard it this past weekend, or at least 2 weekends ago. Maybe a kinglet, maybe a junco, but I think I'm gonna go with the tufted titmouse.
Good try. It's the white-throated sparrow.
Oh, I should have gone with sparrow, man.
We saw a lot of at our bird walk over this weekend at the Penny Pack on Delaware.
We did see a lot of white-throated sparrows, yes.
And someone mentioned that this call kind of sounds like they're singing "Oh Canada."
Okay, it's funny that you mentioned that because I do remember that person saying that, and then I also remember being like, I don't think it sounds like that.
Here, we'll play it again. Listen for "Oh Canada."
I guess so.
Oh, Canada.
Yeah, maybe I should listen to the Canadian national anthem. I'll do better next time. So Sam's got a chance to tie it up this week.
Okay. So this is going to be good for me, I think.
Okay.
Because I've had this thing where I know that warblers are called warblers because they warble.
Okay.
I've never quite known what warbling sounds like. It's not something I've really looked into. So if I guess a warbler and I get it right, I'm going to know that that's what this is. If I guess a warbler and I get it wrong, I'm going to finally know what warbling is not, at least.
But then you get into the warbling vireo, and then you're whole.
Oh,
then you're just
boy.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with a bird that we saw a lot of when we were at Cape May, and that is the yellow-rumped warbler.
Not a warbler.
Okay. Good to know.
It was the tree swallow.
Oh, really? Oh, man. Those things are surprisingly loud.
They are, yeah. And I feel like we always think they are pretty loud because there's a lot of them all the time. All right, so the haters were right. We were going too easy on each other.
We were going way too easy. But bad news for the haters. I now know what warblers don't sound like.
And I know what a white-throated sparrow sounds like. Apparently, that sounds like "O Canada." I don't know how much I believe it, but
Keisha's never heard the Canadian national anthem.
Nope, not Canadian.
Yep. Well, thank you all for listening. This was a great episode, I thought. I hope you all thought so, too. If you did think so, why don't you give us 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you're listening to podcasts? Like we've said before, follow us on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. We're kind of popping off a little bit. Follow our YouTube if you like YouTube. All we post on YouTube is the podcast, just with a visual of the cover art for all of our podcasts. So if you're listening on like a audio service, you're not missing anything. But if you like listening on YouTube, go ahead and check that out.
Mm-hmm. Maybe some other stuff on YouTube in the future, but for now, it's just going to be the episodes.
Yep.
Yeah, send us in hoot topics like we said at the top of the episode at our email, birdsarereal.pod@gmail.com.
Yeah, and seriously, no question is stupid.
Yeah.
Every question is great. We're just looking for volume at this point.
Exactly. Yeah, there are no bad questions.
Only bad answers, and you can be the judge of that because we're giving the answers.
Hope everyone had a good Halloween, and go listen to Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish.
Yeah. You want to give us a rendition of that right now?
No.
Okay.
Why you gotta put me on the spot like that? That's a good song, though.